doesn't like talking about navigation in complex websites?
You know, what I was really gratified by, we're trying to include some topics that are a little bit meatier and a little bit more advanced, and we had more signups this time than we had. So
That's awesome.
yeah, so we've done sort of more general basic topics and not getting as many people as we had today. So
You know, and on that note, I should tell you, and I've been saying this to Diana, we've been using this method for a while that we're going to introduce, but you actually inspired these thoughts in me years ago when I was still in San. A conversation that you and I had, I still remember this conversation. We were talking about organic IA versus hierarchical IA and how to make that work. You know, we're just having a conversation that stayed with me all this time.
what?
Isn't that crazy?
I'm glad to be learning it from you.
Or you gave me the knowledge without maybe knowing. And so.
Okay, so I am going to go ahead and kick us off. It's 4 after. I'm welcome to Firecat First Friday. I'm Susan Price. I run Firecat Studio. We are a user experience consultancy based in San Antonio, but we have badass consultants all over the globe, including our two presenters today, Liz Hubert and Diana Sonis. And they have graciously agreed to share some information about designing navigation for complex systems. And the reason I asked Liz and Diana to talk about this is Liz and I actually worked together at USAA. I know several of you on the call are either actively working at USAA or ever worked at USAA. And we had a very complex site. And I, as a consultant / vendor, have done IA mapping of the whole, like thousands and thousands of pages. And we've done card sorts and all kinds of crazy stuff. But Liz is a wonderful IA, and I can't wait for you to meet her and learn from her and her partner, Diana. Liz and Diana run CX by Design. They both have tons of chops in the UX design world, especially for enterprise size sites. They've worked for Siemens as well as USAA. So I'm going to hand it over to Liz to introduce herself, and then Diana, you introduce yourself, and let's go.
So hello, everyone. As Susan said, first of all, Susan, thank you for having us. Thank you, Firecat, for having us. My name is Liz Hubert. I have been a UX designer since, the early 2000s. And we at CX by Design have a lot of fun specializing in complex problems. So we're glad to be able to share a method we use to solve those problems today.
Awesome. And I'm Diana, and I likewise come from working on enterprise software, UX design, and specializing in information architecture. And I wanted to thank Susan and team for putting this together today. Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm going to kick it off, and then I'm going to pass it on to Liz to dive into some of the details on past projects that we've worked on. So thank you all for being here. We're excited to share this topic with you. Although we've written about this and used this methodology for the past few years, it's still a theory. So there's so much to do with this. And this is really the first time we're presenting these ideas, these specific ideas, to a wider audience. So we are looking for all sorts of feedback or questions and any thoughts you may have, either in the Q&A portion of this presentation or afterwards if you have a minute to chat. So a little bit about us before we get started. I am Diana. I am over here on the left. And with my business partner, Liz, we are the co-founders of CX by Design. We're a human-centered consulting firm that takes a data-driven approach to designing products, services, and systems. And really human-centered, if for those of you who don't know on this call, is really a fancy way of saying we put customers first, customers' needs first in our design decisions. So I don't know if you had a chance to read our bios, but I won't bore you with the fascinating details of our careers. The short story is we're longtime practitioners of user experience or UX design. And within that, our specialty really is information architecture, or the practice of structuring content within online products and services. And that includes navigation. And that's something that we want to talk to you about today. I mean, some of the personal stuff, I'm from New York, Liz is as well, and we usually drink a lot of coffee. It's still morning for me. I'm in Los Angeles at the moment. So I'm about 4 espresso shots in, so we should have a good presentation. All right.
I think that sounds like enough.
That sounds like enough, right?
To get you through the presentation to the next espresso.
That's right. All right, let's dive right in. So just to give you a quick idea, we worked on many projects ranging across different industries, from financial services to e-commerce to consumer packaged goods. Susan mentioned Siemens, which is, it was a bit of more around some of the manufacturing software that they had, very complex enterprise level software. And our project types are really varied. We work, like I said, on enterprise apps, on website redesigns, on native mobile applications. And what we found is that no matter the industry, product, or service, complex navigation is everywhere. And so what do we mean by complex? Most of the time, people think it's this huge hierarchy of navigational items on a website. So if you think of Amazon, for example, it lists everything under the sun: products, services, grocery shopping. Now that it includes Whole Foods. So yeah, that's certainly complex, and there's no way around it. Information architecture has to be, information rather has to be structured on the internet. So when we say complex, we do mean that, it includes that, but it also includes the challenge of translating in-person human interactions to online domains, especially when they're no longer possible in person, as we've seen in 2020. And the pandemic really is an excellent testing ground for our theory, because it forced a lot of businesses to really explore how to do business online when there is no offline experience to count on. But even before 2020, a lot of businesses had increasingly done more business online than in person. You just have to look at, for example, the banking industry. It's a great example. All you have to do is kind of look at the myriad of financial services, startups, and the investment of traditional commercial banks into their online security and infrastructure. So the point here is that really over the years, we've seen more and more businesses attempting to replicate in-person interactions online, but with mixed results, really. So some of that has to do with internal politics, that are both unique to a place and are fairly consistent across the board, but also businesses are often stuck in this rigid view of how their customers navigate their products and services online. And throughout that time, and over the course of many projects, this is the challenge that we've tackled. We wrote about it, and this is what we want to talk to you about today. So going forward, we'll walk you through kind of the general theory and method. We'll show you some examples of what we mean, and talk you through a recent project where we've tested our theory of customer intentions. Let's pause here for a second and talk about human interactions, because it's important. So human interactions, even in their simplest forms, are very, very complex. The nuances of a simple conversation and the in-person social cues we pick up on are not always straightforward. And attempting to translate in-person interactions into online experiences is a huge challenge, but it's essential to explore for businesses. And here's why. Over the years, customer expectations for how a business treats them and how a business understands their needs have gone up significantly. When you walk into a store, most people expect to find a ready associate to help them find anything they want. And you can, as in a person-to-person interaction, you can explain what you need and what you'd like to do, and the associate will walk you over to a product or recommend a service. And that's all easy, hopefully. And it all takes under 2 minutes. The trend we started to notice over the years, and even before COVID put restrictions on in-person interactions, is that people expect the same level of navigation online as they basically experience in a physical place of business. And as crazy as that sounded at first, and maybe still sounds, it's actually not. The line between offline and online gets more blurry with each year, and the level of service is expected to be similar. So the other thing is that businesses or customers know that businesses are collecting so much data on them, and so they expect these online experiences to be highly customized to their intentions and needs. Anyway, so given all this, translating in-person interactions into online experiences is a requirement going forward for many businesses, and it has been kind of accelerated forward by the pandemic, as we've seen this year. And sure, if you have a monopoly in your space and the customer has no choice but to use whatever you're offering, things are fine. But 95% of the time, that's simply not the case. And competition, as you probably know, for customer attention is fierce. So how do you differentiate and create loyal customers given their expectations and needs? Well, of course it's us, and we're UX designers specializing in architecting information online. Our answer lies in rethinking the design of navigation in products and various services and websites. So the central question we're asking ourselves is, how can we design navigation that reflects the complexity of in-person interaction, but is still easy, intuitive, and effective? So in other words, how can we make the digital experience more human for a complex product ecosystem? But before we get into the riveting topic of navigational components, we have to talk about IKEA. Yep, I know it's everybody's favorite store, but when you go into an IKEA store, you're taking on a journey. Like any good story, there are twists, there are turns, all in an effort to immerse the customer in the world of hard-to-assemble furniture. If you ever follow the arrows through IKEA's showrooms, it's like you're in an immersive theatrical play. There are sets, mood lighting, actors with yellow and blue stripes that you can never find. And of course, there are other participants basically wondering how their shopping carts have gotten so full so fast. And none of this is accidental. It's one of the best examples of navigation by design, whether you like being there or not. IKEA knows its customers, and most of them enjoy meandering through various sets, picking up more stuff than they need. But sometimes customers just want something specific, let's say a rubber spatula. And so to walk the general path in IKEA for a rubber spatula can be so frustrating. If you ever came into IKEA for something specific, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, for these cases, IKEA built in shortcuts. And of course, these are not advertised because they're not in the best interest of the business of IKEA. But nevertheless, they're there for you to find, like Easter eggs. And if you've gone through one of these shortcuts, it's nothing short of miraculous how much of the path you can cut on the way to your rubber spatula. So even if most of the time it's a marathon, sometimes it's a sprint. And the combination of marathon and sprint creates this sort of organic conversation with IKEA's brand. It's like IKEA knows exactly how to support and encourage you when you want to meander. And at the same time, they understand your spatula days. So we asked ourselves, how do we help people basically do online what IKEA does in stores? And the answer we came up with was, and still is, IKEA, we think, identified a list of their customers' intentions for coming into their stores and build a bridge between those intentions and their products and services. So what do we mean by intentions? I don't know if anybody has seen this graphic. It's not ours by any means, but we do like to use it. And it certainly helps explain what we're talking about here. So we have a couple of abstracts to represent people navigating software applications or websites here. The hexagons represent a place On a website or in an app, it might be a page or a view. And the person in the middle of the hexagon has several paths. So in an application or on a website, these would be links. So these several paths are the ones that they can take to get to the next place. On the left-hand side, we see an example of a customer path that's often defined on software projects. If you've been on a software project before, you'll recognize this as the happy path. So in this example, we just kind of assume the user has a singular task, and once they start down that path, there are no distractions or questions or thoughts that the user has on this path. And so navigations built this way are very linear, and they ensure that the customer or user is forced to this happy path. Well, unfortunately, this method misses the mark in real life because that's not how life works. We're not designing for utopia here. And so to a user or customer, limiting path options to a very linear, happy path thinking only feels more like a business telling them what they should, where they should go, and less kind of like what the business is supporting them in where they intend to go or want to go. So psychologically, this style of navigation can decrease a user's intrinsic motivation. And by intrinsic motivation, I mean really doing something without any obvious external reward. So forced linear navigation decreases intrinsic motivation, like I said, by decreasing two key things. The first one is competence. And competence, I'll define by the desire to control and master whatever online environment you're in and its outcome. And the second one is autonomy, or the desire for exercising your free will, both of which are very necessary for the customer or the user to have affinity for the brand, to be loyal to the brand, to find the website or software product or service intuitive and easy to use, and be happy with it, essentially, when it comes down to it. So now let's look at the right-hand hexagon diagram, the more realistic path. So in this example, a user walks through a happy path door, but then notices something, and then it kind of decides to take a right. So immediately their environment shifts to support them in meeting whatever intention they now have. By taking a right, the user has given the system a clue about their intention for visiting. With the more realistic path, it doesn't matter if they stay on the happy path or not. The navigational path shapeshifts and customizes to their actions, so there are no navigational mistakes to recover from. It's like when you walk into a store looking for shoes for your 7-year-old. From the front door, you turn right, you begin to walk towards the shoe department. Once there, the store is pretty sure what your intentions are for being there. So the shoe department has everything you need to focus on buying shoes. They don't put the pants that are on sale in the shoe department, just in case. However, a store with good navigation is usually built with ways for you to recover easily should you get lost. So this quick recovery minimizes frustration and allows you, the customer, to explore as well as buy whatever you came for. And navigation online has to be that flexible. So if we go back to digital, this idea of a digital ecosystem, taking into account what you're selecting and cultivating your interface based on that, increases competence and autonomy, thereby increasing intrinsic motivation. So we want our software built on psychological principles that cater to the needs of customers if we are to build long-term loyalty and long-term value. And things like a deep discount or a fancy ad, it's just not sustainable long-term strategy. And customers have to be empowered on your digital property, and they have to enjoy being there. So our hypothesis is if we design digital navigation structures that empower the right side of this diagram, the more realistic path, we'd be creating that human organic conversation and empowering customers to fulfill their intentions, essentially, on your digital property. So this would also increase customers' intrinsic motivation and make them more happy and loyal, and ultimately making your business more profitable. But before we get into the details of a project we worked on previously, let me show you a few examples of navigations designed around customer intentions, or the more realistic path. So this is a pretty familiar example, I think, to everyone. Let's pause and kind of redefine, the way we think of navigation here. So when we hear the word navigation, we often think of kind of the bar across the top of the web page, or the hamburger menu that's on the upper left, or the right-hand side of a page, or in this example, all the options that are available to us on the left-hand side here in the red square. But navigation is so much more. It's not just the hierarchical, as you're seeing on the left-hand side. It can also be lateral, and I'll get into that in a minute. So hierarchical navigation anchors a user, giving them a sense of place, kind of like IKEA does with the clearly marked arrows down their main path from entrance to checkout. But over-reliance on the structure of hierarchical navigation increases cognitive load. And for those of you who don't know what that is, cognitive load it's just a fancy way of saying makes you think harder. And that also makes your digital ecosystem confusing and frustrating, which often decreases autonomy again and competence along the way. So this is why lateral navigation is important here. It carries the users through your digital property by following their intentions or interests as they navigate the product or website. Now, we know that lateral navigation isn't new, but what is new is defining this navigation by customer intention rather than by the standard way of information hierarchy. YouTube, as you can see here, is a great example of what we mean. For me, for example, rarely do I use the hierarchical navigation on YouTube that's in the hamburger menu. And most of the time, I use the in-page navigation, which pulls me to other videos, possibly in adjacent categories and channels. But YouTube knows that my primary intention is to watch videos, explore similar maybe content, and discover adjacent channels to my area of interest. So they designed a simple lateral navigation that allows me to fulfill my intentions without ever going into the hamburger menu. And as anyone who's ever gone down the rabbit hole of YouTube videos knows, you can click on that for hours. Now, their lateral navigation doesn't tell you one thing about their business or information or how information is organized and structured, but it does combine meeting customer intentions and meeting their business goals. Now, let me show you one more example. So Wikipedia, everybody knows this website. They know their users' intentions for the site involve learning all they can, right? And so, they do provide linear navigation over here on the left. They also know that usually people come to their site by searching out something very specific. And they know that when people are learning, they usually come up with a myriad of questions about whatever they're reading in the moment. So in order to allow users to meet these intentions, Wikipedia places breadcrumbs or shortcuts via links to other pages of the site. So a user can change their path autonomously and with competence. This makes Wikipedia one of the most used sites in the world. And both YouTube and Wikipedia are complex websites, given the amount of information they need to host and organize, but they're also two of the simplest and most used sites on the internet. And that's because they create an organic conversation through understanding and designing navigation for customer intentions. So I'm going to pause here. I've talked a lot. Right now, I'm going to pass it over to Liz, and she'll walk you through a fairly recent example of how we applied customer intentions and the method and the theory in our work. All right, so I'm going to keep on sharing, but how do I pass it over to you, Liz?
I'm just going to start talking, and
Are
you're
you going to
just,
start talking? All right.
yeah, you're going to be like the man behind the curtain or woman behind the
The,
curtain.
the woman, hopefully, but yes.
But, or, you know, whatever you choose to decide. Okay, so
All right.
we, thanks, Dee. So we worked with a company called Sitka. And besides being a town in Alaska, Sitka is a small hunting apparel and gear company who design and sell high-end, very intricately designed products for hunters. Their products were, and still are, unparalleled. But not many of their potential customers or prospects were able to make the connection between the products and their high price points all on their own. To most customers, a camo jacket was just a camo jacket. But Sitka was designing each of their products specifically for hunting a particular type of prey in a certain environment. So, for example, they create one jacket that retails at several $100s. It's that expensive because it's specifically designed for hunting big game animals at high elevations, think 10,000 feet and above. And apparently when you're doing that, I don't know this from experience, but I learned this on the project, you need a lot of zippers and pockets and, you know, just different things. Being that the founders of Sitka and the designers of the apparel were hunters themselves, they were ensuring that this gear had everything a hunter could possibly need. When customers were shopping for gear in a store, the sales representatives, they were able to explain this complexity. But once the potential customer, well, in accordance with that, once the customer had that conversation, they usually bought the product, assuming they were the target customer and they had the disposable income. The problem for Sitka was they wanted to move their sales online. This was a few years ago, as Dee said, so it was pre-COVID. But of course, as Diana mentioned, more and more companies are needing to do the same. Now, at the time, Sitka had a site, but conversion rates were nothing compared to in-store. And I should note that most of the data that we were working off of at the time was this combination of sales and other quantitative insights. But we also did qualitative interviews with 30 plus prospects, casual customers, loyal customers, and even cheerleaders of the brand. So Sitka brought us in to help. They brought us in to help replicate, or at least find a way to increase online conversions. And we saw the only way they could do that is by creating this organic conversation with their digital ecosystem, just like the sales representatives were having in the stores. We decided to apply the customer intentions methodology. And we did this by first defining the overall list of possible customer intentions for visiting the website. And so that basically answering the question, what were customers aiming to do when visiting Sitka's website? And then we modeled and designed each page of the site to meet these interactions. So let's talk a little bit more about what this looked like. First, we got to know our users. So over on the upper left, you can see a list of them. And in this particular case, some of you who are practitioners would maybe use personas, and we've used personas before. In this case, we were working with an individual who worked on creating customer loyalty with brands, and these were the customer types he usually pointed out. So we knew who our customer types were, and we knew how often they visited the site. And then over on the right, we have their intentions, the customer's intentions. You can see there's about a list of 8 or so. These are all the aims a customer may have when visiting Sitka's website. Now, the intentions a user may have could change each time they visit the site or even while they're on the site. But in general, these are the main 8 reasons any one of our users would visit Sitka's website. So we then mapped out the good old happy path for each of these intentions, and that's what you're seeing here below. So for example, here in red, we have the buy an intention happy path. This is the most happy path of all to buying an item on the site. The user starts at the home page, which in and of itself is an idea that's questionable, but that idea is for another day. But in this case, they start on the home page, and then they click on an individual product page like a jacket or a pair of pants. And somehow they're so wowed by this product page on their first visit to the site or their subsequent visit that they add this product to their cart and they check out. And everybody's happy. The customer has a product and the business has a sale. But we know this happy path isn't often the case. Users wander. They may look at one product and then another. They may move away from buying an item to maybe saying, oh, I want to go find a retailer. So how do we ensure that their intentions are fulfilled even if they veer off the happy path, which is likely to happen? And the answer is more hexagons, obviously. We ensure that each place, or in this case, page, on the happy path has doorways or links to enable the customer to fulfill their intentions as they wander. So let me talk about this diagram real quick. When we say page or place, we're talking about the hexagon that's in the middle. So what you're seeing here is another version of that happy path. That's what the 1, 2, 3, 4 is representative of. And then in the middle, let's take the home page, for example. In the middle is the home page, and around the home page are all of the doorways that a user needs in order to potentially fulfill their intentions. I say potentially at the home page level because, as Diana pointed out, we created this method to, like a sales representative does in store, or like IKEA set up their store to do, their paths to do. We wanted the site to be able to adjust as we learned about what the user would be doing. So what that means is at step 1, when the user is on the home page, we don't yet know what their intention is. They haven't given us a clue. They haven't clicked anywhere yet. So the home page needs to have doorways to help customers solve for any of the 8 intentions that could be possible. But once they click on the product page, like in step 2 down here on the lower left, we can double down on the fact that they intend to either buy an item or find a retailer or investigate a hunting solution. Why else would they click on a product? So on this product page, we ensure there are obvious doors or links to help them add to cart or view other items that exist, but we also ensure they could fulfill other potential intentions with relevant information or doorways like articles or retailer information. And on this modeling goes. But the important part here is that we do this for every page of the site. Okay, and I'm going to warn you, the next thing I'm going to say is the most challenging part of this method. It's the hardest conversations to have with businesses, but if you remember our examples of Wikipedia and YouTube, you could see the importance of it. And that is, the only links or modules that should exist on the bottom, in the body of a page are those that exist to fulfill a customer intention. No other content or links should exist on that page. Sure, you're going to have global navigation in the header and footer, but the content of the page is only there to fulfill customer intentions. Otherwise, you're adding noise to the customer's experience, you're increasing that cognitive load, and you're decreasing their autonomy and competence and intrinsic motivation. Okay, so as the user moves throughout the site, the doorways they need to fulfill their intentions shift, and so each step of their journey feels considered. And even though the paths are still predefined, they're customized and intentional, pun intended. So how does this actually turn into navigation? How do we actually make this into a website? It would take us another few hours of discussion to go into the details of this method, and we love talking about the details, so we're happy to have those discussions. We do workshops and all this stuff, and we have articles like we said. But the 5-minute description is this. First, we defined and prioritized customer intentions for each page of the site or application or ecosystem. Now, most pages are only going to have a subset of all the intentions. For example, we determined that there were 8 customer intentions for coming to Sitka Gear's website. But for Sitka Gear's product page, the prioritized list of customer intentions was only 4. It included to buy an item, to investigate or research a hunting solution, to find a retailer, or to understand what Sitka does. So we create that prioritized list per page. And then we create page templates where each module of the page is aimed at fulfilling a customer intention. For Sitka, the product page template looked like this. Each row of this template represents a hexagon from our hexagon flow that we saw earlier. You'll remember this character here on the lower right. So these hexagons tell us all the doorways we need to have on the product page. And the modules that we have here in this template or interaction model or box model should align with those hexagons. So when we have, in this example, the level 3, the gear, that big module at the top, that's aimed at helping a user or customer buy an item. And then the next module below that is an article that helps them understand how to solve or understand a hunting solution better. So there's no question that designing for intentions takes some sort of upfront information architecture deep dive. But once that initial structure is in place, there's a huge benefit that comes in. So let's say your business develops a new product or service and you need to create a page for it online. You already know the list of prioritized customers' intentions for a product page. It's not going to change. And you already know what template you need to use, the general modules you need to have on the page in order to fulfill those customer intentions. So all that's left to define is this product-specific words or images and maybe some particular interactions. And that's where really the UX and the design creativity comes in. And from there, you get this paint by numbers approach to site updates. Putting new products and services online takes a far shorter amount of time. Sure, there are still elements to design, like we said, but otherwise your structure is pretty built beyond having the templates and the modules. And the best part is the structure has this organic conversation baked in between your customer and your business, because it's prioritized by customer intention. So the template turns into something like a website. Okay, we know it looks like a web page. We didn't promise we were redefining the web here, but what's important is what's happening within this web page. You could see here on the left how the information customers need to meet their priority intention dominates the page. They're probably here to buy an item or at least learn more about it. But as we scroll down the page, as you see on the left, other intention modules appear to fulfill relevant customer intentions. Fulfilling these intentions is what an in-store sales rep can do as they're having a conversation with you. And now the site is structured to do the same thing. So now when I'm on this product page, we can find out why this jacket is special. And we can also understand the key whitetail funnels. I still don't know what that means, but the article is there. And I'm sure if I was a hunter, it would help me understand why I should buy this jacket to hunt a whitetail deer. We've had hierarchical and lateral navigation for a long time. As Diana said, this isn't new. But when we define our hierarchical navigations to be this sense of place and our lateral navigations to have this really deep sense of intentions backing them, every single piece of content on the page has a mountain of rationale and purpose behind it. And P.S., it's easier for Sitka to update their site now too. So by understanding your customer's intentions, redefining how we think about navigation, modeling and designing an ecosystem that combines hierarchical and lateral or intentions-based navigation, and putting this paint-by-numbers system in place to create and update your ecosystem based on the intersection of customer intentions and business goals, you make navigating your complex digital ecosystem a more human experience. You make it like talking to somebody in the store. You make it like going to IKEA. This increases customers' feelings of autonomy and competence. It creates the organic conversation. It increases intrinsic motivation, and they want to keep doing business with you. In short, designing for customer intentions creates happy, loyal customers while saving you money and resources in the long run. And to us, that's just good business. So thank you for listening. As we've said, we've been writing articles on our site. We're going to be releasing them soon. If you want to learn more about using the intentions for your business, or if you just want to geek out on this stuff, which we love doing, you can sign up for our newsletter or reach out to us anytime.